Okay, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Next, we have item 180962, agreed upon procedure. Recommendation that the city accept the city auditor's report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holt, welcome.
Carlos Holt, City Auditor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. In September, we had a joint meeting with the Gainesville Housing Authority Board and the City Commission. And it was clear, I was present at the meeting, it was clear by the end of the meeting that both parties wanted to form some type of partnership in the future. I thereafter recommended that we do an engagement to do our due diligence before partnering with the Gainesville Housing Authority. And so we put it on the agenda and modified the audit plan, and the commission approved it. And there, I contacted Pam Davis, the director, and we had some personnel shortages at the time. I was able to hire a contractor, and Mr. Chin Yon, my assistant city auditor, worked closely with the contractor, and Ms. Davis and her staff were over several times, and the contractor and Mr. Yon were present at the facility at Gainesville Housing Authority offices for a number of weeks. And he's going to present the test work that we did. We did do a very, very good scrubbing, if you will, of 29 areas. And Ms. Davis and her staff were very much a pleasure to work with. And I'll let Mr. Yon get into the test work that was done.
So first of all, would like to extend our appreciation to the Gainesville Housing Authority. They are they are in a very positive attitude to accept our engagement, and they are very cooperative and providing documents we wanted and open the accounting system for us. So with that, I wish you the.
Which one did you just want to go through the matrix? Or?
The matrix. All right. So basically, this engagement is a agreed upon procedure and with a limited scope. So the testing work and field works are not as detailed as a conventional audit that we would perform, but our auditor covered 29 risk areas of their financial operations. So I just briefly go over the 29 risk areas. So first of all, is basically the rent revenue completeness. The tenant rent payments were sampled and tested, vouched back to their payments. No exception was found. And then the rent credits, so those adjustments to the regular rent for payments, and auditors tested samples and looked at the request forms and the reasons for those adjustments, and no exception were found either. Asset sales, they don't have any sales of asset during the time of during the scope of the audit, so nothing's been done there. There's inventory adjustment issues. It's not conventional way of documenting it, but it's not a violation of general accepted accounting system, so we consider that's a minor issue. The Gainesville Housing Authority provide actually further explanation on that, and they have also action items to improve that process. Let me see. For payroll vacation accrual, auditor found some minor errors in the accruals and pointed out, and the Housing Authority also provided action items to make that correction. No exceptions in manual journal entries, no exception in balance sheet account reconciliation. There's a couple of monthly reconciliation was late due to some personal reasons in the staff, but it's a minor issue that we consider. So out of it, okay, let's see. So these are the network system user access. There's no exception in the testing, but minor control issues were presented to the Housing Authority. They had action items as well for future improvement. Right. Policy procedure reviews and the Board of Commission meeting minutes, there's no exceptions. So the Gainesville Housing Authority has provided a response. Basically, they are in agreement of all our findings, and they also provided the action items based on our recommendations. Now, this is because the Gainesville Housing Authority is not in our audit universe. We don't. The recommendation is not formal. It's just kind of our suggestion to them, and they are actually provide all the responses and action items for future improvement. So overall, we think this is a good engagement, and so present that to the City Commission for your approval and acceptance.
I just wanted to elaborate more on the cooperation that Ms. Davis and her staff were very professional and, of course, opened everything. Nothing was beyond our purview, and our guy went. Yeah, he looked at everything. He looked at their inventory of different things. I had access to the computers, to the books, and they just welcomed us with open arms. And as Mr. Yon said, we provided suggestions, not recommendations, since they are a separate entity, and they went so far as to reply back on each and every one of them as to exactly what they were going to do, agreeing and further strengthening their internal control system. So there is no reason to not recommend we do business with them. We found no cause for concern to form any type of partnership with Gainesville Housing Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Commissioner Simmons.
Vice Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem. I would motion to accept the auditor's report and recommend a partnership with Gainesville Housing Authority.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any mayor to? So there's a motion on the floor to adopt the.
To accept the report?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for a recommendation to. Or what was it? Your second portion?
Move forward to work with the relationship partnership.
Okay, so motion to accept the audit report and continue working on a formalized relationship with Gainesville Housing Authority. Members of the public that wish to speak to the motion. Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody? Okay, back to the commission. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Okay. Next, we have item 180848, audit of City of Gainesville's REICHERT House Youth Academy, governance, financial processes, and performance matrix with the recommendation that the commission accept the city auditor's report and the interim city manager's response.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And Mr. Holt, before you introduce this item, I want to just make a few general comments. I know that most of you are here for this particular item. I know that many of you are here because you have had a direct relationship with the Reichert House, either in support or as a beneficiary of their services. I want to make very clear to everybody that this item is not about whether the Reichert House is being closed down or not. I got some frantic emails asking if Reichert House is being closed. That is absolutely not the case. This also is in no way an indictment or criticism of the program in general. Those of us who have been around it long enough know the value that the Reichert House provides to our community. I have personally taught several of the students who have gone through the Reichert House, who are now employees of the state attorney, who are entrepreneurs, who are community leaders. I have complete trust and faith in Chief Jones and John Alexander and Robert Woody in their oversight and leadership of this important community institution. The purpose of these audits is to look for opportunities, for internal city departments and organizations organizations that the city looks to do business with, like the Gainesville Housing Authority that you just heard the audit report for, to ensure that we are maximizing the opportunities and the benefits. That is not to say that when these audits get done, there are not reasonable grounds for significant disagreement about the report and the outcomes. And we are certainly here to discuss that today. I also want to remind everybody that for the vast majority of the recommendations, there is concurrence from management, there is agreement, and there is an admission that there are things that we can do to improve the organization, serve more young men, and leverage the funds that they have in an even more productive way. There are a few where there is no opinion, so management either agrees or disagrees, and there are a very few where there are some disagreements about the findings, and we will discuss those. We are all here because we care about the Reichert House, and we want to make sure that it continues to grow and serve more and more people, because we know our community has a tremendous need, and we've seen the proven results. And one of the things that everyone read in the audit report is there's sometimes a lack of verification of what those benefits are, but it's very difficult to measure the child who never drops out of school, or the child who never gets arrested, or the child who never picks up a drug habit because they weren't exposed to the wrong element, instead had great leadership and support. Those statistics are impossible to measure because they don't exist. And so the Reichert House is unique. It's unique in our community, and it's unique in our community's commitment. And, I think at the end of this discussion, if we can all walk away from here agreeing that we care about the future of this institution, that we want to look for ways to strengthen it and help it grow and build, that we will all end up in a place that we can be happy with and be proud of as we move forward. And so I thank you all for being here. I thank for all of you who have reached out and shared your thoughts and your feelings and your experiences. I know that knowing so many people in the room, that you'll approach this with a spirit of mutual cooperation and support to get us to a point that will be in the best benefit of both the Reichert House and the city at large. So with that, Mr. Holt, I'll turn it over to you, and you can start your presentation. And then as far as process goes, I'm going to certainly allow for any commission questions to be answered, and then I will recognize Manager Bowie, and she can go through the management's response to the different items. and then we'll get a motion on the floor, and we'll hear from members of the public. So that's sort of what you can expect as far as the procedure. And once again, we try very hard to be civil and cordial in here. We want everyone to feel welcomed and that their voice is equally as valued as anybody else's. So that's why we ask for no cheering or jeering, and we certainly avoid ad hominem attacks, meaning you don't go after someone personally, but we try to keep our focus on the issue and the objective items that are before us. So, Mr. Holt, please.
Well, thank you, sir. Just while you're on the process there, we normally, this was a little bit different at the reporting stage. Normally, we issue a draft report, we get it back from management, and we incorporate their arguments and so forth. And that's why Florida has a statute. It is the draft reports until they get to the final are all confidential and exempt, so that because the report's not yet in its final stage, you want to hear back from management before finalizing it and hear what their arguments are and so forth. This time we did, we find out, I was notified by the city attorney, we had, that the report had been out there to the public, and so we decided to go ahead and issue the report on April, to finalize it and issue it to the commission on April the 3rd. And management may have taken plenty of action, since that time. It's already the 18th. So normally we would have tried to schedule as soon as we got their responses back and schedule it. So this one was a little bit different. And I do want to say that, preface everything by saying this audit was on the finance, the governance, and the performance metrics. Nothing to do with how they operate REICHERT House. And I think I made that clear several times when we put it on the audit plan. Everybody is aware that REICHERT House does very fine things. There's successful outcomes, as the mayor said, in the media and everywhere in the city all the time. And nobody is saying that isn't true. And these things hopefully will just go to make it better and possibly even better funded. So I just want to make sure that we have nothing to do with how they mentor the participants and so forth. That wasn't in our scope. We started this. The audit was announced on the October the 25th. It's been on the audit plan for 2 years. And we had some trouble, as we'll go through here before, getting all the information in one place at the same time. So that's the reason we have split this off. We went ahead and decided to report on Part A, so management could be carrying out their actions, and then for Part B to be carried out separately. I had decided, as soon as we knew we wouldn't report it all, I had already decided a long time ago to contract that out. I'd worked with procurement for the last 3.5 weeks and to get a vehicle to do that. And we have a CPA, local CPA firm that wants to take the job and report back to the city on they wrote up their own procedures and they're going to report back to the city, not to me, not to management. So that's what we have planned. It's not finalized yet, but that's what we have in place. The timeline, I just wanted to go through that a little bit. In 2010, my former assistant city auditor, Ms. Marzak, did an engagement similar to this one, and it wasn't actually published to the city commission. It was provided to the GPD management, and most of the same large items we're going to be going through were on that report. There was remember Chief of Staff Betty Baker, that we had worked with her on several issues, several small issues. We had several hotlines that came in late 2015 and 2016. For those of you that don't know, I just came here in April of 2015, so I was kind of getting to know the place. I I did get a complainant that claimed that Reichert House was misusing grant funds in November 2016. I thoroughly investigated it and found out to be false. At that time, I began working with people over at the police department, specifically Mr. Woody, Deborah Holt, and later Mr. Belk on numerous COSO control issues. I then met with because I didn't understand the organization, how we had the 501 and the community or and then the city program and who was doing what. It seemed nobody seemed to have a handle on being able to describe that. I met with the previous finance director, April Shuping, and she basically came up with most of the same issues from 2010, same ones we're going to show you here. I had a short meeting with the city attorney and city manager Lyons at the time, saying that we needed to audit this, but we should put some time, knowing that they were working on these controls and stuff, that we should put some time in place, let them put some of these measures in place before we began the audit. Everybody seemed to agree with that. So then we put it on the 2018 audit plan that was approved by the commission last year. We got bogged down a little bit in that the CCC audit, so we didn't get to it, and so we pushed it forward this year, and then we started out on it 25th of October. And most of my lead auditor, Emily Bowie, formerly a CPA with KPMG, a manager, has been the lead and done the vast amount of the work, and she's going to take a lot of the reporting here. Go ahead.
So the objectives of the audit are listed right here. We were trying to determine if the governance and finance process for the operations were operating effectively and in the best manner for Reichert House Youth Academy. Part of that, the financial operations, we wanted to make sure they were documented, transparent, and carried out in an effective manner. And then from there, we were going to look at the other entities. One that we knew about was Reichert House Inc. And then as we went through the audit, we found out that there were more entities that were contributing. Then the last objective is related to the performance metrics that were being reported by Reichert House Youth Academy on their performance, and then assessing whether or not they were accurate and understandable.
Ms. Bowie, just so folks at home can make sure to hear you, will you pull that mic kind of a little, talk a little more directly? Yeah, it's fine.
So right now, the way that the program is structured, it's under Gainesville Police Department, who reports directly to the city manager's office. So that is why we directed to the city manager's office their response. Part of what we determined while we were going through the audit process is that there are 4 contributing separate non-city entities: Reichert House Inc., Palm Breeze Youth Services Inc., Community Foundations, and Black on Black Crime Task Force that contribute to the functioning of Reichert House Youth Academy. And they provide, whether it be in-kind services or actual financial support for the Youth Academy. So below you'll see the scope and methodology. Basically, within this time period, we looked at fiscal year 16, which is October 1st, 2015 through September 30th, 2018. And in that time, we were able to kind of get a bigger picture of who all contributes into that during that time period. Moving forward, what you will see here is that these are the City of Gainesville resources that were actually provided, not budgeted for, but actually provided. And within that, you will see This is how they maintain their buildings, vehicles, land, pay salaries, and also reimburse purchase cards. Next, we'll move on to the non-city entities. If you want to describe what.
Okay, well, what we would expect to find usually with these non-city, which is very common in these kind of things on, is for two types, non-city entities. One where they raise funds and provide funds, or they provide in-kind benefits with a city program, either through direct access or reimbursement. Or the other type that frequently found is where the non-city entity is providing some of the services and the city is reimbursing them with either direct grants or on a reimbursable basis. Those are very common structures in these type programs. Right, and we'll just go through them here. REICHERT House, Inc.
Do you want me to go through them?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so for REICHERT House Inc., this was the most largely known relationship that REICHERT House Youth Academy had. It is a 501c3, which essentially means they are there to raise funds for a purpose, which is the REICHERT House Youth Academy program. When we were getting a better understanding of what their relationship was, we knew that there was a former city employee that did the books for REICHERT House Inc., meaning their accounting records. And we also identified there was possibly a current city employee maintaining those accounting records currently. What we did note is that all the grants that are being managed outside of the city were awarded to REICHERT House Inc. And right now, as of the information that we have received, we don't know that there is any contractual relationship or agreement in place between REICHERT House Inc. and the Youth Academy program. Next, we're moving down to Palm Breeze Youth Services. Again, this is another 501c3 whose purpose and mission is to raise funds for different programs, one of which is REICHERT House Youth Academy. When we were looking through it, we have found that there were 2 city employees that currently stand as signatories on their bank accounts, as well as perform significant roles within REICHERT House Youth Academy. Within that, we noted that there are many grants that are being facilitated through the Palm Breeze Youth Services accounts. And we know that because we received actual documentation seeing that they paid funds out of Palm Breeze Youth Services and then we presume would be reimbursed back into Palm Breeze Youth Services. But because of the timing of the documentation, we weren't able to actually see it coming back in. We just could see it going out. One grant in particular we noted was the National PAL Grant, and that grant was applied for by the director of REICHERT House Youth Academy, and it was applied for with a Gainesville tax ID and DUNS number, which is how they pay back the funds for a grant. And it was awarded under a name that was not a 501c3 that we could find on Sunbiz. So that's kind of the high level of what's going on with Palm Breeze Youth Services. The next is Black on Black Crime Task Force. Again, another 501c3, has a mission for raising funds for like services. They have a long-standing relationship with REICHERT House Youth Academy, even before it was the Youth Academy, and they provide mainly in-kind services to what we know as of right now. When we started looking into it, we identified a bank account, or 3 different bank accounts there that had 2 different city employees on those bank accounts, and we wouldn't expect to see that because it's an outside entity. And again, there's no contractual relationship, and I didn't mention that, but that's the same thing with Palm Breeze Youth Services.
Community Foundation.
So the last financial relationship that we're going to talk about is community foundations. And community foundations is a 501c3 that typically will collect money for different causes. and has been extremely helpful and transparent through the whole process. They originated a contract for an endowment fund for Reichert House through Reichert House Inc. back in 2010. And so they had also then created another account because they were receiving donations for Reichert House Youth Academy, but didn't have anywhere to put them. So they put them in this earmarked fund account, and that was created in 2016. However, there was no contractual agreement in place for that account either. And the one thing we noted was that the only reason we were able to identify Palm Breeze Youth Services as a current financial relationship was because there was a $41,000 funds transfer from community foundations to Palm Breeze Youth Services. It was over a couple transactions. And up until that point, we were only aware of Palm Breeze Youth Services as a future endeavor, but it appeared that all through fiscal year 18, they had been working together.
This diagram, if you'll note here, kind of a flow chart, just to kind of give you an indication of why we didn't complete the entire audit in one step. There's various pieces and layers here that have to be put together. And across the top, you see some various funds. And there's the organizations here. There's Black on Black, there's Reichert House Inc., City of Gainesville, Palm Breeze Community Foundation, and down here at the bottom is the city's program. So there's various pieces where money came through. The one that I've been asked about so far is this GRU donation here was $2,500, and I just wanted to show you why. It might seem, the question is always, why, can't you tell us where your money went? And so I just want to show you what some of the difficulties involved in this. First of all, here's the check from Gainesville Regional Utilities. There's no signature on the back. It does say Harbor Community Bank. It was made out to Reichert House Inc. Okay, so first thing I did was ask the director who also is the registered agent for Reichert House Inc., and director of Reichert House Youth Services, for the, can we, get with you, get your, look at your bank accounts and all that stuff. And what he replied that he didn't think he could. That's probably true. His legal authority didn't grant him that right. So look for another way. I was actually, but then the very next day, I got a letter from an attorney, not with the city attorney's office, saying that this is an outside firm, so nothing would be provided. So then, I went to the city attorney's office, who suggested I draft up some letters, which I did, and they sent these to the board members. So I sent those on January 28th. If you recall, this whole process started on December 18th. So here on January 28th, got the letter, or sent the letter to the board, Reichert House Inc. Then I got the first letter back from them on February 12th, saying, okay, we're fine with cooperating with you, but the letter that we got from the other attorney wasn't authorized. So then I talked to them again. Then they further replied that the only accounts they had were at the community foundation. They didn't have any accounts in that bank. So I thought, well, maybe they're just not aware of them. Board members change out, So I sent them a couple of photocopies of checks and so forth, such as this one, that I don't know his position title, Mr. Albright over at Gainesville Police Department was keeping a checkbook. That's a check from that account. And so I asked them to look in from Reichert House Inc. So I asked them to look, can you research that account? Also, we've got some statements from city employees that they're black on black, may have had a joint account with them. We weren't sure. It's hard to tell from the way these are listed. It says Reichert House on there. And so we had three of those. And then, so we asked them to look into that. And then here on April 15th, we've got a final word that they're saying now that none of those bank accounts are theirs. They don't have any bank accounts except for Community Foundation. So I contacted GRU and, why don't you, go to your bank SunTrust and do a check trace, which they started on April the 2nd. There's several pages of documentation on, how they did it and so forth, and they finally got the check traced, and the bottom line was that here is the account number, just like we found out on the back of the check, but the other bank doesn't have to tell them who the owner is. So, in other words, from all of that time, we still don't actually know with the name of the account at the bank that the check was deposited into. So that's just one demonstration of what, and that doesn't mean the money wasn't used for Reichert House. There could be very easily, good explanations because we have these 5 organizations. It's just that's how long it takes to figure. I'm just showing you the time involved in trying to trace some of these, and that's one of our primary findings, since we don't have the contractual agreement. Probably our biggest finding ever when we consulted with the city attorney's office on how should these be arranged is to have some type of contractual agreement between every one of these organizations and the city, which I would imagine when you partner with Gainesville Housing Authority, there'll be something drawn up saying who does what, who has rights to do what. Is there an audit clause? Do they, is there a report produced say every quarterly of transactions or something, or activity reports or something like that, and then everybody would know all of this stuff, and it wouldn't take all of this time. That's basically all we're saying, that the time involved in running this stuff down is quite extensive.
So we're moving on into the objectives and conclusions, and this is overall our conclusions for the report. So what we'll go into next, we'll give you guys a minute if you have any questions, is the observations, so the areas of improvement, but these are our overall conclusions. So for the first objective, is the present governance structure designed and implemented to effectively carry out the mission of Reichert House Youth Academy? And we responded generally no. Are the financial operations of the Reichert House Youth Academy documented, transparent, and carried out in an effective manner? And the answer was no. Are the resources provided by the City of Gainesville and other entities being used in an effective manner? And the response was unknown. And that's where we go into Part B. And the last objective is the performance of Reichert House Youth Academy captured through an accurate and understandable performance metric, and the answer was no.
I think that one transaction kind of demonstrated that, one, we don't have the agreements in place, and two, the transparency isn't there. We don't have we should be able to go look and easily find where donations were spent, and then it was spent for a good reason. And I'm not saying they weren't spent for a good reason. I'm just saying we should be able to figure it out fairly simply. And also that, next page. Let's see, where are we at here?
There you go.
Yeah, this by no means is evidence that there's plenty of evidence that there's many successful outcomes at Reichert House at various levels on the last part of the performance metric. And as I heard Inspector Campo say the other day, that we sometimes have a hard time showing our value, and I think that's here on the performance metric. There's got to be something out there to show all of these good outcomes that come out of Reichert House that we need to keep, and perhaps streamlining and these business practices here and these organizational transactions will enable them to do lots more. Okay.
Before we move on, do you guys have any questions, or would you like us
Please
to
continue.
Okay. So as we go in, these are the areas of specific instances that we found throughout the audit that we have recommendations that we have provided to city management. The first being the lack of standard business processes in place. And what we see here is that there are not up-to-date policies and procedures, nor are there actual contractual arrangements in place with the 4 entities that were outlined below. Those were the non-city entities that we were discussing before. And part of that is because part of the reason that has caused an issue is because we see city employees acting on behalf of these entities in numerous different ways, one of which is conducting transfers of funds from one non-city entity to the other, obtaining grants on their behalf, maintaining non-city entity accounting records, controlling and accessing non-city bank accounts, and then accepting positions on their board as well as becoming registered agents. These are not things we would typically see when you have a close relationship with these 501c3s. Oh, thank you. And so, this just poses the risk of not having these in place because it will cause inconsistent practices among the entities, lack of transparency, not allowing us to be able to come in and audit and ask the question where funds are going. There's a risk of liability that the way that the non-city entities operate that the city might be liable for, as well as there is potential for fraudulent activity and that donor and grant funding may not be reaching the program as intended. So those are the risks. And part of that, we build in recommendations to assess and try and mitigate those risks, some of which are currently assessing the upper management of Reichert House Youth Academy was our recommendation. The next was putting in standard operating procedures. The following was to examine all non-city entities that you're currently working with, determine what relationships are necessary and adding value to the program, and then dissolving the other ones. To work with the city attorney's office to create updated contractual arrangements so that all of these things are outlined. And then lastly, if there are funds that need to be held outside of the city, to be held in an account like community foundations where they were very cooperative and transparent as to how they operate, how the funds go out, and willing to work with us to show us where the funds are going.
And just to further clarify those, that we're not saying those are the exact one. It's not, that's management choices after they've figured out everything, who to work with and who to stay with and so forth. That's obviously up to management.
Moving on, observation B was just the lack of transparency. What we ran into throughout the audit was for Palm Breeze Youth Services, we were told from the beginning from both directors of working with the Reichert House Youth Academy that Palm Breeze Youth Services was going to be a future endeavor and not currently being used as a funding source. However, based on getting the records from community foundations, we identified that there was $41,000 in transfers being made from community foundations that has a relationship with Reichert House Inc. to Palm Breeze Youth Services upon request of the directors of our city program. And part of that is when I requested support for that $41,000 transfer, and granted it was over a few of them, I wasn't able to get that. I ended up receiving the letter from the non-city attorneys.
Can we, go ahead and do a Palm Breeze just to give you another example. This is our. I showed you before our interaction with REICHERT House Inc. This was, if you'll move it up there, our first on December 18th. I also I noted that Chief Jones was the registered agent, so I wrote him so he could get in touch with Palm Breeze so we could get account information. He did check with them, and I guess I'm not sure they got back with him. So there again, I wrote after the same thing with REICHERT House, I went ahead and wrote the Palm Breeze Youth Services a letter. That was on January 28th. I heard back from Attorney Bobby Frank on the 7th of February. We chatted, and she did we chatted, and she did send over a box of documents, and it arrived, and we accepted those, of course. We didn't know if they're complete. Still have no idea whether that's everything we need. Then she sent a confirmation that we delivered it. I sent a confirmation we accepted them, but we didn't know for sure. In the meantime, I had sent Palm Breeze, even though I got the documents from her, I didn't actually ever hear back from the board at Palm Breeze as to make sure that that's who they wanted as the representative, and they did write me back and say yes, her and another gentleman were the representatives to go through. So then I wrote them another letter thinking that, I looked through, there wasn't that many months in there. I only had transactions during those specified months that I wrote in the letter. And then I also gave them a list of required items. And I did get a good letter back saying that, okay, that's all we had. That's the only times that we did business with them. This is all the way on March 15th. That's the only document period we had, and that's fine if that's all there are. By this time, we had already determined to split this part off, so we have not fully examined all of those documents. So we are that is going to be done by the contractor. We'll just turn those over, and then they can proceed. Anyway, just another, because of we don't have the contractual agreements, it's kind of a layered process to try to audit this, not just like, at walk-in over at Gainesville Housing Authority and they say, open all, and they opened all their books. It doesn't happen that way because we've got 5 entities instead of 1.
Moving on, we're going to look at REICHERT House Inc. This is the longest standing relationship as far as the 501c3s.
Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
And with that, we were told throughout the interview process, as far as like talking and looking at all the supporting documentation, that REICHERT House Inc. was no longer really an active participant or fundraising arm for the Youth Academy. And we were told that by both the directors as well as the GPD officer who maintains that has worked with them in the past, but also is a signatory on that Palm Breeze Youth Services bank account. And however, based on what we knew from the community foundations, we saw activity in community foundations. So then we were unsure if that relationship was truly inactive as noted, or if we just weren't aware of bank accounts or funds coming in outside of the ones that we knew about. In addition to that, it was when we received that letter from the non-city attorney that noted that we weren't going to receive documents for REICHERT House Inc., that we went through the process of contacting the board. Next, we're going to talk about community foundations. And community foundations, it has a relationship with REICHERT House Inc., but also is the one that did the $41,000 transfer from their Friends of REICHERT House account to Palm Breeze Youth Services based on the request of the directors of the Youth Academy program. And they have been extremely cooperative and transparent, helping us trying to figure out exactly what happened with that and why that relationship existed and why that fund transfer occurred. And lastly, we have the Black on Black Crime Task Force, which I noted earlier. The main large donations they provide is through in-kind services that they actually report on their 990, which is their financial statement for the end of the year. And within that, we noted by going through the interview process that there were 3 bank accounts that had 2 city employees on there. And we requested to have access to those accounts, and we were met with confusion if those accounts exist or if they don't, and also whether or not why there were city employees on it and all of that.
And then overall down here, like I reiterated, that we're, due to the layer of administration and communication necessary, it's hard to interact with all of these people at one time to gather information. So it's hard to tell exactly where you are. And that could be easily solved by formal agreements.
And some of the risks it poses not having those arrangements, the lack of transparency comes into inconsistent practices, no clear lines of who's doing business for who. Having city employees doing business for non-city entities, it could be confusing to an outsider as to who they're representing at the time, as well as opportunities for fraudulent activity, as well as donor and grant funding doesn't reach the program or is withdrawn. So we did note that there was a grant that was retracted by United Way, and it was because of the lack of transparency, as well as the program had initially requested it for a program that was not actually in place at the time, and so United Way then did retract the funding. And so our recommendations are based on how to mitigate some of those risks that were posed. And you'll see, again, it's to formalize those contractual arrangements. And while they are doing the due diligence to figure out if these non-city entities are essential to taking on the, or essential to funding the youth program, to transfer all the funds into either the city-held account or into community foundations due to their transparency. And that way they can get a true budget for the program, because right now they have the city budget, but then there's no idea as far as where all the other funds are and how they can be spent for the program.
And that's intended to mean just for the time being until they establish these relationships, and then they can set up formal relationships as they see fit.
The next recommendation is to look to the state ethics standpoint and determine if these the relationships that they currently have for city employees with these non-city entities are appropriate, such as holding positions on boards, being the registered agent of closely related non-city entities. And lastly, insist that no city employee handles books for a non-city entity that they have a close relationship with the city, whether it be on the clock or off the clock.
It's the 2010 report that actually didn't get published, actually focused a lot on that it was hard to tell where, if a city employee is doing, working for the nonprofit and for the city, and then it's hard to determine where one job began and the next one, one ended and the next one began. Are you doing this for the city, REICHERT House Youth Services, or for REICHERT House Inc., or for Palm Breeze Youth Services? So, we're suggesting that a formalized separation occur. Okay. Go ahead.
Ms. Boyd, if you ever feel that you need to take a break, I'm sure Mr. Holt can take over for you. So just
This is
let it be
actually
known.
his section, so
Oh,
that's
okay.
perfect.
Okay, all right. Yeah, she almost wasn't here.
Not making any assumptions, but.
Yeah. Okay, so obtaining and managing grant funds outside the city's oversight. There again, as we've already demonstrated that through that diagram that grants are applied for by city employees and deposited in those, REICHERT Housing, Palm Breeze, Youth Services, and so Community Foundation. And if it would be fine and dandy if we had transparency and formalized agreements. But since we don't, it's harder to tell where anything is, the GRU money, as we said. Cox, we know we found some correspondence when we got some grant from Cox Cable, but we're never able to find out how much it was or where it went to. Since we never got those other bank account statements, Palm Breeze and REICHERT House, we did get the Palm Breeze one, but we haven't gone through them yet. We're not sure which accounts these are in. United Way grant was returned. The Alachua County Community Agency Partnership, when we got with the county, they said the grant max reimbursement was $19,500, but then their book showed they had reimbursed $40,800, which something's got to be off. We were never able to find that, and hopefully that can be cleared up in the next part of the audit. And also the Police Athletic League, the grant there was applied for and awarded, and according to them, they cut the check. Initially, reimbursement checks made out to the Gainesville Police Department, and then it was applied for using Gainesville Police Athletic League, like she already stated. We couldn't find it as a formalized, registered organization with the state, so there was no DUNS number and there was no employer identification number. Both of those that were used were the city's numbers. So even though we didn't get the city didn't get the money in their account, it was our DUNS and employer identification number were used. So let's see, what page is that? 16, which brings up some issues because some of the Police Athletic League is used for mentoring, valuable mentoring to the participants, of course, but without an employer identification number, we don't know. We couldn't tell from the few checks that we did see that any taxes were taken out because they were all rounded amounts, and so that could be an issue. If someone is paid over $600 a year, then IRS Form 1099 is required. And since the city's DUNS and employer identification number were used, there's where, we could be held responsible, or at least could be a mix-up and tough to explain. There again, formalized agreement would clear that up.
Mr. Holt, could you please pause for a question, Commissioner Simmons?
Mr. Holt, explain that again.
Which one?
The Gainesville PAL Inc. It wasn't registered.
Not registered with the state. We couldn't find it with the state. In fact, I just looked a little while ago. And also the DUNS number, the Data Universal Numbering System. Every commercial organization has to have a DUNS number. It's created by Dun and Bradstreet. And then also an employer identification. If you're going to pay people, you need an employer identification number. But according to the National Police Athletic League that gave us the money, which I believe are federal dollars, we used the city's numbers were used. So if Gainesville Police Athletic League is an organization somewhere, then they need to register and get their own number. Some of this stuff just needs to be cleared up, administratively taken care of, and it's all fixable. It would just take a little bit of time and organization. There's nothing in this report that isn't fixable in 2 months. Did I answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. let's see, am I still on this one?
Yep.
Okay, and there again, cause, no contractual agreements. That's our biggest overriding observation. Effect could be lost revenues. Some things could be mismanaged when you're not sure where it is between all these organizations, and it definitely increases risk. Anytime you're getting money also from other entities such as the federal government, if you don't meet reporting deadlines, if you're not able to show where you've executed and so forth, then they can either take it back or not give you any more. And so we are at risk of that by not having a proper documentation. And there again, the SOPs and the contracts would take care of this. And our recommendations are discontinue the use of any bank as it relates to expenses for REICHERT. This is just for now, only for now until it's cleared up. And there might be other entities that we're unaware of. Work with the city attorney to create a standardized contractual agreement that would take care of the roles and responsibilities of each organization, consistent and established processes, full transparency, an audit clause, require all contributions on behalf of grants awarded to be held and managed by the city or community foundation. That again is just for now until everything is established. There's no reason they couldn't form relationships with anybody they want to. And then maybe required activity reports every quarter so that everybody is on the same sheet 4 times a year, that everybody knows what they're doing. And where are we at here? Observation D, am I taking this one?
Sure. Observation D is about the inaccurate and inadequate procedures for the performance metrics. Basically, there was one performance metric that was used. It wasn't consistently tracked, but it related to the graduation rate. What I found just looking at it, by understanding how they calculated the graduation rate, I compared it to the county, state, and federal graduation rate calculations and determined that it wasn't comparable. And so that's not saying that the graduation rate couldn't be comparable. It just needs to be calculated in a way that would be comparable. And with that, you can potentially, if you come down to risks and effect, have donors lose confidence if you're not accurately reporting performance metrics, but also if you don't have enough performance metrics. And so that was something that we knew from the beginning was an issue. They were having trouble identifying a metric that they could capture what the program was actually doing. And so part of that, we decided to provide recommendations related to working with city leadership to reach out to other organizations or within, trying to determine what type of performance metrics would actually work for their organization, as well as having it being tracked consistently over time, making it accurate and demonstrating successful outcomes, and to put procedures in place to make sure that it's done consistently.
The poorly documented transactions here are all P cards, and this isn't to say that there isn't plenty of these in the rest of the city. And in fact, we have an unfinished audit of a citywide P card that's been shelved a little bit, and there's plenty of those to go around. But we did new as the city manager pointed out, new procedures were established since this time, and so. Probably at the current time, some of these are better documented, and things such as not saying how it benefited the program, or if there's not a receipt there and so forth. So this is an easy fix. Oh, okay, well, the effect is it could be inappropriate use of funds, ineffective monitoring, weak controls, risk is fraudulent activity, non-compliance with policies or liability for acts. We did, the lease department, we did find payments for an apartment over a couple of years, and we were told it was the Reichert House Youth Scholarship Apartment, and we just found that to be a non-standard. We still didn't find the lease, but we found plenty of payments for it, and it was discussed in several interviews. We're recommending not to have an apartment leased.
Okay, thank you both. Appreciate the presentation. I will now recognize Ms. Bowie. Sounds good.
So in the interest of time, I have some updates that are not in your backup, and I won't go through all of the backup, but I did want to provide updates, and then I'll close out with a little bit more detail on why there were 3 areas of disagreement and 2 areas where there was a sort of a neutral position from management. So I want to start out by saying the recent audit of the Reichert House Youth Academy by the Gainesville City Auditor shows no definitive evidence of wrongdoing. It's important to say that. However, it is important to note that the audit alerts our attention to processes, personnel, and performance measures that we believe warrant further attention. So in an effort to swiftly address those possible deficiencies that are included in the report, I wanted to share the following actions that have been taken by management. Many, I need to say, are currently in progress and ongoing. Specifically, the Office of the City Manager, in coordination with HR and Finance, and they're both here. So we've done the following things. And again, not to imply that there's wrongdoing, because some of the actions really, to me, jump to a conclusion, but in an abundance of caution, one of the first things that we did was suspend P-card transactions from the Reichert House staff, and that's because we need a more formal review of an investigation that was conducted, that is being conducted right now by the city's finance department. We have made initial contact with those outside agencies that were referenced in the report, and by initial, that's all the contact that we have had, because prior to now, I don't think that would have been appropriate. But in the initial contact, we reached out to organizations that provide direct funding or in-kind contributions, and we have, for the record, asked for and received each group's cooperation in reviewing appropriate financial records as it relates to the Reichert House only. It's important to note that we have no current contracts with any of these outside agencies, nor do we have, I believe, the authority beyond that without an audit clause that's in agreement to go ask them for information that doesn't relate to the Reichert House. So we've asked for and received their participation on future audits. Again, those conversations are ongoing. We've started reviewing the organizational structure of the Reichert House itself, and that includes asking HR to audit existing positions. Currently, we're working with finance to evaluate all of our options, and this is important because it's been said a few times how different the Reichert House is, but for us to migrate financial functions to the city's finance department where we believe that's where they should be, that means that we'll have to write new administrative procedures, and frankly, we need to find the right mechanism to ensure the financial fidelity of the program and that we can meet their peak needs of service, which in this case, for the organization, is oftentimes after hours. Obviously, that's unique in the sense that we have city departments, right? They close when we're closed. So all of that is currently ongoing and under review in finance. We have directed staff to initiate a change in registered agents on file. Again, not to imply wrongdoing, but really for their own protection. So city employees should not be registered agents on file with the state of Florida. We've asked for them to make that change and to register that change with the state secretary's website as it relates only to agencies that do business with the city. Other issues that I really wanted to bring up, they were outside the scope of the audit, but they're important to the conversation because they require additional time to address, include obviously working with legal. We need contracts or MOUs with any of these agencies that provide support, either financial or in kind, to the Reichert House, and that would include language that allows us to enter into an arrangement for an audit clause. Evaluating whether the Reichert House Youth Academy could or should be stood up as a separate city department, or even whether the current station within GPD is the right home. Frankly, I think that's an issue that has been kicked down the road and it's arrived here. now. Devising a financial oversight process that I said earlier supports the 24/7 operation of the program, and those are just some of the short to longer term issues. So I'm offering these updates because I want to communicate that the Office of the City Manager has proceeded with an earnest and thorough response to the issues that have been identified in the audit. It is important to note that finding the solutions will take time, frankly, given the incompleteness of the information. It's really difficult to get an incomplete file and know what to do next. It is important to restate that there is no definitive evidence of wrongdoing at REICHERT that has been substantiated in the report. It's equally important, particularly because I have a duty to disclose any issue of public concern. I have that duty. So it's important that everyone involved feels a sense of trust that our audit process is transparent and that it's free and fair. Let me be clear. Management must and will investigate any allegation of mismanagement at any city department, notwithstanding whatever department it is. All I'm requesting is that we be allowed to do that in an atmosphere that doesn't raise additional concerns. So I'm respectfully requesting that, I'm not going to read the packet, you've seen my responses, that you accept the responses to the audit and that you support an independent outside audit for the continuation. Apparently that process had already started. That was not the case when I was going through this, so that's why you see that recommendation specifically spelled out. Let me also just, if I could, address 3 areas, because you did say that there's concurrence in many of them, and there is, but there are 3 areas where there was disagreement, and I want to explain really why, for the purpose of the conversation, to be on the record and for the public. So there was one recommendation that said we should dissolve any relationship relating to funding accepting donations from the REICHERT House Youth Academy program through in-kind donations. Well, that's a problem for a lot of reasons. One, I don't know that I have enough information to do that. I also don't know what the impact would be to just say, that's it, we're not accepting any more donations. The larger issue in my mind is to correct the deficiency of not having a contract in place. It's really difficult to get a contract in place with agencies once they get upset with the city. So there's some repair that needs to be done. So I just want to be on the record, that is why. Many of the recommendations are good business practices, which is why there's so much concurrence. The other area where there was disagreement is there was a recommendation to work with the city's finance department to transfer funds from all non-city entities to city-held bank accounts in cases where that is possible, and then as an alternative, to use the community foundation for funds that cannot be accepted directly by a government entity. So on the face of it, that sounds like a great recommendation. But the problem is we don't have the legal authority to go to an outside agency with whom we have no contract and say, transfer all of your funds. So I had a problem with the way it was worded. And the second part of the disagreement to that was whether it's the community foundation or Palm Breeze or whatever the external agency is that we go to and say, can you be our holding account? That organization, if they're a nonprofit, they have a board of directors. So the executive director cannot enter into that agreement, and they have to vote to affirm it. So again, it was just the wording of the language that was a concern for me, not the recommendation itself, the way that it was worded. And I think the last point of disagreement for me was this section towards the end on poorly documented and unusual transactions. So it's worth noting, and the auditor did say that the P-card transactions have been an issue in the city for a while, and there's an audit currently on pause. However, let me back up. Last August, the finance department went through an internal controls update, and so I took issue with 301 transactions being listed in an audit report as a recommendation when they've already been addressed. That was my issue. The 2 areas that are neutral, one is a recommendation from the city auditor that, I think I've already addressed that one about the community foundation. I'm sorry. This is the recommendation from the city auditor's office, and Ms. Emily Bowie spoke to this. I think you're actually a Bowie, not a Bowie. I'm a Bowie. Sorry. She spoke to this issue when she talked about performance measures. So the issue I have is, in my opinion, evaluating whether the REICHERT House uses the appropriate performance measures, to me, is outside the scope of the city auditor's office. And I'm taking a personal point of privilege. I used to run the United Way, and really the performance measures and metrics are put together by that organization. And there's a process, and I would venture to say, and I know this from conversations I've had with the staff, that they use something more than graduation rate. Now, maybe there's some miscommunication about what was shared, but in my experience, the auditor doesn't weigh in on your performance metrics. They may be asking for a full summary of what they are, but it's not appropriate to hold them to a standard when that is an internal matter where they set their metrics based on their enrollment, based on their objectives, based on, there's a whole body of work on results-based accountability that I won't bore you with now, but it is a process, and it is a process that involves a harder look at the performance of the organization. And even though I'm the interim city manager, I can't go to them and say, here's what your performance metrics ought to be. I also think it's unfair, frankly, to hold the REICHERT House to a standard that the city is not held to. So you know that we're currently working with strategic initiatives to
All right,
come up.
if we could, it's very distracting if you're talking while the city manager is trying to give her a report. You'll get a chance.
We're working with all the city departments, including ours, to come up with performance metrics for the entire city. Ultimately, our goal will be for the city to have a dashboard where citizens can go to it that ties directly into our strategic plan. So I just felt like that recommendation was really outside the scope of a look at, it's one thing to say we're going to evaluate a performance metrics, but I really think you need to have the people who do that for a living doing that. So I'll close by saying the issue that seems to be resolved, I guess, in the sense of, I have to tell you, in my professional experience, I've never been through an audit process like this. It's very unusual to have a part one and a part two, to have incomplete information, and frankly, it was a contentious process. And so in my opinion, there's just room for improvement. I need to be on the record and clearly say that management has a responsibility to address any issue, any allegation. And so clearly we're doing that. If you have questions specific to any of the other responses where there was concurrence, you probably don't, but if you do, I'm happy to answer them. But it is my recommendation, two things: that we proceed with an outside auditor for reasons that I've already explained, and that you accept my responses to the report.
Okay, thank you
Thank you.
very much, Ms. Bowie. Okay, we'll turn it over to the commission. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks to everyone who is here. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your passion for REICHERT House and for the city of Gainesville. I appreciate everything that our staff, through the auditor's office and through the manager's office and the REICHERT House, have done to prepare for this. I appreciate everything that the nonprofits involved have done to be a part of this and prepare for this and to show up. There's a lot that I want to say about this. I will not say it all. The first thing I will say is that the REICHERT House absolutely has my complete support. I don't want anybody hanging on, whether or not Ward's going to go after REICHERT House. I'm not. I have no intention of doing that. I support certainly Chief Jones. He knows that. I hope Mr. Alexander knows that he has my support as well. There are things that we need to talk about through a variety of areas here. I will tell you, not that this has a lot of bearing on it, but I've spent about 20 years in nonprofit management myself and fundraising, so I have a little experience on that side of things. Not as deep as Manager Bowie, but I have been through audits myself, and I know the kinds of questions that you go through with a nonprofit audit. This is very much like a nonprofit audit. It's not the standard city audit that we normally see. Let me start off with just a few things that we do need to clear up for REICHERT House. That this confirms for me some things that we do need to do. I would really rather we have contractual relationships between REICHERT House and any nonprofits, any outside the city agencies. We ought to have contractual relationships. It ought to be in writing what we expect from them and what they expect from us. That ought to be clear. I'm uncomfortable with, and you've already addressed this, and you're addressing the contractual relationships as well. I'm uncomfortable with city employees being on the boards of very close nonprofits like that. I understand how it happens, believe me, I get it. You're trying to get something accomplished, you're understaffed, and there's an opportunity to create something that makes the process possible, so you just get it done. I am totally understanding of that. I know how it works. But it's something we shouldn't do. And managers already let me know that we're in the process of fixing that, or maybe have fixed it. So that's good. We need to be able to, any of our residents needs to be able to track the money. That's a thing we have to be able to do very cleanly. And again, you're understaffed, you're trying to get things done. Sometimes, I've been there, sometimes you don't write down everything you wish you had written down, and then 6 months later, you can't find the receipt. I get it. But that's a thing that we have to get better at. Reichert House produces amazing results. Amazing results. There are people alive in our community today who would not be alive without the Reichert House. There are people leading in our community today who would not be in leadership positions without the Reichert House. We need to make sure that the Reichert House is supported and flourishes. No question about that. I asked them questions about the audit process. Not specific questions, but let me say concerns. Going to the very beginning, where we talk about it being a multi-phase process, I'm not sure it needed to be a multi-phase process. I think, given the context of this, going back to 2010, and let me say also that I'm a little annoyed at previous commissions for not, having their finger on things and having pushed something forward to get all this information out there. We should not have let things back up until 2019 to do an audit. It's beneficial to Reichert House. It's beneficial to any part of the city of Gainesville to have regular audits, because then you find out whether or not you're on track. It keeps you focused on the main thing. So I'm disappointed that this goes back through several managers and several auditors before we got to a place where we could actually do an audit. Given that, and given how complicated this obviously was going to be, I would rather we had one phase audit and that it had been an outside agency, because it was obviously going to be complicated from the beginning. There was, and the more I read about it and the more I talk to folks, and I've read this multiple times, it was not going to be something that we could get all the answers for in-house. It was going to be a mess. And clearly it was a mess trying to get this done. And unfortunately, there are a few things in the objectives that I also agree really are different than what we normally audit. We audit standard practices and things. This is different than any other city agency. It's an agency of an agency and does different things than we do as a city, which I'll address in a bit too. I'm not sure that the objectives were the right objectives. And I say that again as a nonprofit guy. I'm not sure that the objectives were exactly correct for what we're trying to accomplish, or that the organization, the auditor's office trying to accomplish it, was the right organization to do that, as Ms. Bowie kind of pointed out. The metrics that Reichert House uses, there are ways to measure that, but they're not the kind of things we normally would do in an audit. So I would like to have seen an outside agency do this in one report, rather than some inside, some outside, multi-phase. I think that creates more concerns. I know it creates more concerns. Through this process, particularly in the last few weeks, the audit and the process of the audit has become the focus, rather than Reichert House being the focus. That's not how it's supposed to work. When we get to a point, let me say, an audit, we all agree on this, that any audit should be a management tool. The results of the audit, the data that we get back from the audit, ought to be a tool that we as a board can use to make good management decisions. When the audit becomes the focus, instead, the process of the audit becomes the focus, instead of what's being audited being the focus, it becomes really difficult to use that audit as a good management tool. And I'm not sure we can use this as a good management tool. It absolutely raises issues that I laid out at the beginning of my comments that we must address and that are being addressed. And that's important. I don't want to try to let anything off the hook. Those are real issues and they need to be addressed. But this document, unfortunately, goes off in a lot of directions and becomes its own thing, and that obscures the ability to use it as a good management tool. That's disappointing, because we've been waiting since 2010 to get something like this that we could use as a management tool. And I'm not blaming anybody for that. We probably should have, as a commission, a year or two ago said, hey, let's not do this internally. This is too big and messy. Let's get somebody separate so we don't run into the problems that we have now run into. Because we all know this has become a bit of a circus. I mean, we all kind of see how that happened. And that's not what anybody wants. Nobody wants to be where we are now, where everybody's kind of hanging on what's going to happen, you know, how did this get done? Was it done the right way? Because then people start asking questions about everybody's integrity involved, and that's a bad place to be. I also want to point out that I had some conversations with some of the nonprofits involved, with folks, some of who are here, that are generally unimpeachable kind of folks, you know, that have been involved in the city of Gainesville for decades, and as folks who are pillars of our community. I know that some of those folks, and I'm going to use a Helen Warren phrase here, we have a failure to communicate.
I used it just the other day.
Well, yeah, I know, I heard it. When we went to talk to some of the nonprofits involved here, they did not hear things the way they were intended, I think. And that's a concern as well. I think that's one of the reasons we didn't get the information we were looking for. So that's a concern. It's weird having to go, it's difficult to be in the auditor's position to have to go to nonprofits as a city auditor and figure out exactly what to audit in a nonprofit. I think some of the nonprofits might have heard, we need all your stuff. And they knew that they shouldn't turn over all their stuff. So there was a lot of missing each other's intent here. That's fixable. But it's not fixable with this audit, unfortunately. We're not at a good place with this audit. And that's a shame, because again, it's been needed for at least 9 years. I'm not going to make any kind of motion yet, because a lot of other people I want to hear from, my colleagues certainly. But I don't believe that, I hate to say this, but I don't believe that this audit is a useful management tool for us right now. And that's a shame. I think we're probably going to have to start over and do one audit outside instead of the rest of the audit outside going forward. That's what I have to say for now. Thank you for indulging me to talk for a long time. I usually don't talk this long, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for coming. I agree with many of the sentiments that Commissioner Ward brought forward. There are things that need to be fixed with the REICHERT House, but it's a program that I fully support. But I do have some issues with it, mainly in the completeness of it and putting it out before it's complete, because I think that allows things to jump to conclusions and other aspects like that. I'm glad that the city manager is addressing the issues that have been brought forward, and I think a lot of them have kind of been outstanding for a long time, so I'm glad those are getting done. I do have a question for the city auditor. Do you mind? So on page 22 of the audit, and I think it's 23 in the backup, so it depends on which version you have. But the city auditor's responses after the city manager is where it says the initial claim made of conflict of interest. Do you see that, Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Page you been?
I think it's 23 and that's 22 maybe in the one you have, and 23. It says city auditor's response, Appendix A. Initial
Okay.
claim made of conflict of interest. Do you mind reading that first sentence for me after initial claim made of conflict of interest?
I'm not
Despite the
sure.
October 25th. Do you see that?
You're talking about the top paragraph where it says faulty timeline?
No, so the next section where it says initial claim made of conflict of interest, the next
Okay.
bolded section, in that
Okay.
first sentence, it starts with despite October.
Still don't see what you're talking about. Although an inquiry, is it you talking about there?
No, there's a bolded section below that paragraph. It says initial claim made of
Oh,
conflict of
initial
interest.
claim made despite 25 announced to city management. There was no mention of conflict with anyone.
Do you mind reading it like out loud for everyone? No.
Despite the October 25th, 2018 announcement, the city management, charter officers, city commission, and Gainesville police, there was no mention of a claim of conflict by anyone until made by the city manager, interim city manager, March 18th, 2019, which 6 days after receiving the report.
So last year we had a conversation that I believe was in December sometime. After,
December 12th.
December 12th.
2:30.
Yeah. And during that conversation, we were talking about the investigation that came out with the incidents of the police being called out to GPD. During that conversation, I repeatedly said that moving forward, there will be a perception of a conflict of interest of any audit the GPD that you do to GPD, and that'll be out there.
I disagree with that. My recollection is that you brought up the fact somebody could use this and say you had a conflict of interest. And I said, yeah, but if they did that, they would have to say I favored the police department because the police came when we called them to my house and, nobody was ever arrested.
I said it could be used in either way. It could be used to either help a report or hurt a report. And I said that it could be, yes, it could be used, there'd be a perception out there in the public.
And it was never brought up on this audit.
I said any audit with GPD. So it just concerns me that you have here that, and I'm mentioned in the city commission.
And 6-on-1 meetings every other week since then, you never mentioned it one time.
No, I haven't mentioned that time because I mentioned it that one time when we did. I wasn't going to bring up the.
But the audit was underway. Every 6-on-1 meeting, I would say the status of all audits, and nobody ever said.
I brought up that there will be a perception of a conflict of interest, and what you say here is that there was no mention of a claim.
There wasn't.
But I did.
No,
I did mention that there would be a claim that there would be a
You said
perception of a
somebody
conflict of interest.
Could be. No, you never mentioned this audit whatsoever.
I said any audit with GPD.
I-
I did say that.
Okay, well, you might have said any audit with GPD, but you never said this one was underway. And then never mentioned it again.
So I mentioned it once, but here you say it was never mentioned.
Okay.
So I'm gonna mention it. I didn't want to bring forward the whole your investigation into you personally into the public sphere.
Yeah.
And this is what happened at the very end.
Oh, I
we
remember.
came to, and it says that there's a conflict of interest out there. That's what city manager brought forward, that there's potential, and I told you that was here. But what you read here is not a true fact,
It
and I'm
is-
concerning that when you have in here, it's not true.
Well, that's my recollection of the conversation that.
So you said I did not mention a conflict of interest in that.
No, you said that somebody could say that, and we talked about it. Now, in my recollection, we both agreed at the very end that they would have to say that I favored the police. And at that
I know I didn't
time,
say
we
that.
didn't know how any audit was coming out. This was in December. It'd only been underway 4 weeks.
I agree. That's why I said it before the audit came out. I knew this would happen in this situation. And it's disturbing that you write here that there was never a mention of it, because I did mention that there would be a conflict of interest with anyone that GPD had. And that's
Okay, but
very concerning that that's happened, and
well, besides that isolated instance, which I recollect different, nobody else ever said anything, and you never brought it up again.
you right here, there's no mention. I did mention it.
Okay, but I don't recollect it the same. I don't recollect it you saying it about this particular
I said
audit.
any audit with GPD, and it's disturbing that you can't
Okay.
say that wasn't happening.
I didn't say it.
And that's more disturbing is that you have here is just not a true fact in the report, because I did mention it, and that raises concerns of other things that are written in tense. If this is not true, what else is not true? And it's concerning for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons.
Mayor, I just wanted to thank the members, staff, and all those who are passionate about the Reichert House and the wonderful job that they've done and continue to do with the young men in our community. It really has made a difference in a lot of young men's lives, and also in the lives of their parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles. And like everyone here has stated before, it is a unique program. You can't measure someone's inability to achieve certain things in a certain way like everyone else. This particular program highlights some of the issues that we face in our community and the diverse ways that we have to be creative in correcting certain things. And so I just want to commend previous staff members or previous GPD officers, whoever have touched this program, nonprofit organizations, anyone that has made a positive impact and have done wonderful things with the children. I want to really commend them, because I have seen firsthand the great things that the Reichert House Youth Academy has done for our children. But with that being said, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. I'm concerned about some of the things that I have seen in this report, I don't know what you want to call it, but some things that I've seen in this report, I'm concerned. If we really want to have an impact and really truly be the stewards that we are capable of becoming, we have to do better than this. There's a lot of conflict of interest. We have to address a lot of issues, and I'm happy Ms. Boyd has started this process. Thank you for this. But aside of Ms. Boyd, what are we going to do to address these issues? I'm going to say that again. Aside of Ms. Boyd, what are we going to do to address these issues that's troubling to me? I think what this did is highlighted some things that we need to address. It put us on the right path to move forward. It put us in a place where we can either place blame, or we can accept it, correct it, and move on. I'm willing to accept Mrs. Boyd's recommendation to proceed with an outside auditor. Like my colleagues up here, I think that's critical. We need it. We need other eyes. We need fresh eyes. And I'm willing to do that. I'm also willing to accept her responses and the steps that she has taken to correct these issues. But I want to be very clear. I mean, very clear. We need to straighten up. Our children depend on it. Our community depend on it. We have a lot of great things to offer. We have a lot of great things to continue to do. And we need to really start initiating our greatness to do those things. Thank you. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Warren.
It's a pleasure to follow you with your comments, Commissioner Simmons. I think you will hear, those who have the interest and the support for the REICHERT House, that you have our support. You are a program that I love being able to brag about. You know, the work of the chief, the work of Rosa Williams, the work that this community has supported to provide a service from a little house, a little meeting room for kids to get together, because it was recognized 20-some years ago that we had a problem with young men, particularly, who didn't have a place to go after school. And the concept of bringing them in to do that mentorship, help them with their homework, and give them a meal, and help engage them in some activity during that time of day that otherwise is when young men are typically getting into trouble. And then hopefully when they're tired with some food in their belly, they're given a ride home. You can't come up with a program, well, yeah, you could come up with a program better than that. And I know there are people out there who want to do something more. Number one, foremost, the REICHERT House has been recognized as an exemplary model for how to work on engaging our youth outside of the classroom. And this city will continue to support that effort, and with the work of the Children's Trust that's coming together now, and the relationship that we have with the University of Florida, and what we have going on with the continuum of care in this city that's looking at the services of low-income housing and getting people off the streets and keeping them in a home. We can't fall back now. We have to really step together and walk together and talk together. We have problems. This is one of my other things that I love to say, because I feel like maybe in another life I could have been an engineer, because I like looking at problems and walking into a room and seeing some problems and saying, these are solutions. And we need to have opportunities for people to get together to talk about those things, because we have become too dependent on the police to take care of every criminal behavior. We need to be raising our young people with a sense of integrity and pride, and give them a sense of purpose. I mean, I don't know a single child out there, and there's a lot of adults that need this too, you all. I don't know of a single person from cradle to death that doesn't want to feel that their life had meaning, that they contributed to something that was of value. And that is what REICHERT House does. We have buildings there full of computers and musical equipment, and we should have bands marching up and down the street with these kids playing music and playing roles and speaking out in the community about what they see are the problems and what they see are the solutions that they're going to take up in their life. And we haven't been able to provide enough services to the REICHERT House to make use of all that equipment. 3D printers. They could have a band, Rockin' House, REICHERT, you know? And that's what, as Commissioner Simmons says, we got to come together on that. And so that was just point number one. We need to move forward. To point number two, it's Thursday. We're beyond Monday quarterbacking. Kicking the goal. Who's on first? This is so much more important than any game out there. And we got to get with it. If we could put half the energy into our community building that we put into watching a football game, we'd be something else. Here's one of my other things that I like to say. If all the world's a stage and we are but its actors, let us be among the ones who act as if it matters. Now, I ask Shakespeare for forgiveness on that. But I think you all get the drift of that. We are living in a critical time. And to me, that makes me really excited to be here and alive and to be in Gainesville, where I know people want to do something different. And the opportunity to serve on this commission has been one of the most meaningful things that I've ever done in my life, other than this really incredible soccer goal that I made from the midfield with the wind behind my back to win a soccer game in Mobile. That was cool. This can be better. I'm glad to hear the support for moving forward with a third-party audit. And I do want to point out that what I heard, that idea is in motion 20 weeks ago. I want to put the credit back on the auditor to recognize that 5 months ago, okay? It would have been great if that had been done in August, but it wasn't. I want to recognize that the auditor was given the uncomfortable role of doing something that hadn't been done in 10 years. It had been approached and avoided, little fixes. You know, it seems so obvious. Why not get an auditor into the staff? I don't know if that had been tried, or I don't know what. That was yesterday. I have a hard time remembering what I did for breakfast, but I do know today, now at this moment, we need to look at what we can do to put things together to set it right. Nobody wants to, we don't want to dwell on burning the bridge. We've had enough of a fire in the world this week. We want to build the bridges and keep this program working and to allow it to succeed so that other communities will repeat this. If it's good once, it's good twice. We need this in a lot of areas. I had the opportunity just last month walking through Pine Ridge with the chief and met one of those young men who's in his 20s or 30s who has succeeded from the REICHERT House. And, you know, I know that he's just one of many. And we want to continue that work. We do. There's so much more that we need to do with that. But I am not into throwing rocks and stones at anybody out there for a job that wasn't done in perfection. I will support the motion that we move forward with a third party to do it. And I hope that we'll be able to put an auditor in place. This program's got to fly. And I think I'm hearing that support here, and I thank everybody. But I want to thank Carlos and his staff. I was part of the crew who interviewed Carlos. I've seen his work with his audits that he's done, and I've talked to people that he has worked with, and I see that he has worked with many people in different situations. And I believe that he has a commitment to do, he has so much pride in what an auditor does. And he has brought the city up on some things in other areas that needed to be attentioned to too. And I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for everyone for being here for, many of you were sitting down at 1 o'clock, here we are at 4 o'clock, so it's a testament to your passion and care for this issue. I want to start by first laying down the motion to accept the auditor's report and the city manager's response, all of the recommendations proposed by the interim city manager.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, motion second on the floor.
Now, I just want to share a quick story. I can agree with a lot of what was said up here on the dais, and I want to say a quick story. So I've got a friend who was recently elected mayor in California, a friend in Wisconsin who was recently elected to the city commission, and a friend in Maryland who was recently elected to the school board. And we talk a lot about issues that all communities all across this country face. One of those being, how do you help young people succeed who have, being young, you just run into trouble sometimes. And I started talking to them about the REICHERT House. In my words and in my actions, I've supported the REICHERT House since I got to this commission and before that. I started talking to them about the different programs, the success stories, the innovation. And not only were they impressed, but their response was, we don't have things like this where we are. So we talk about how great the Reichert House is for our community. I think we need to have an appreciation for just how unique and innovative the Reichert House is nationally. That is the legacy of the Reichert House. And we've been doing it for 30 years. We got 30 more to go, and even more beyond that. That's going to be the legacy. Now, look, I read the media, I read social media. Some of us need to be spending less time on social media. I read all of it leading up to this. And the only thing I could help but think was, this is all going to seem so small in comparison to what's coming next and what's already behind. So I think that we should appreciate and take stock of the emotion and sort of the reality of what we had to face. But I think let's just look forward with a great vision, because we have great people in place to help us do that. And we have a city that's committed to supporting that vision in perpetuity. So we're very grateful for you all being here today, and thank you.
Thank you. Before I go back around a second time, won't belabor the point. First of all, I do want to thank and congratulate the Reichert House management and staff for an audit that found no wrongdoing, no malfeasance, no impropriety in any way. It's what we all expect, and we're not surprised by those findings, but thank you for the ongoing excellent work that you do in very difficult circumstances. We also recognize that. It's heroic work that goes on there, and it goes on a daily basis. With that, I hope that the entire staff recognizes, and I've had conversations with Mr. Woody, with the chief, with Mr. Alexander. These are not things that haven't been discussed. That they all realize there are things that we can do differently and better, which is why I'm going to support the motion, because we do need to move forward with trying to get contracts in place with these outside organizations. We do need to tighten up our oversight procedures of where money comes from and how it's spent. We do need to tighten up management oversight, and we absolutely need to get city employees off signing authority as quickly as possible. The Madam Manager has indicated that they're already moving forward with those things, and that's an important immediate step. I support the second half of the outside audit, and I don't want to beat this into the ground, but when there are concerns about a conflict of interest, it's not whether there is, but whether there is a perception. And that's where I think that there might have been there was an opportunity earlier in this process to recognize that was there and just avoid all appearance of a conflict and move it out. And so that's a lesson learned. I think that as organizations learn from these audits, so do we as a commission, and so do senior management, and that will help us with the next one. I would like an update to come back to the commission on to be scheduled for the July 18th agenda, because I think that's a realistic amount of time to see how some of these changes are to be implemented. And let the public know sort of where we are with that. I also want to recognize how Reichert House got to where it is with this situation with 4 outside agencies. And I know the folks that do this, all right? And what happens is there is an incredible need in our community. And whether it's the chief or Mr. Alexander, they say, look, we got to serve these young men. We're in the middle of a budget year. We need resources. let's either go to a 501c3 that we already know, like Black on Black, or let's form a new one. You've got incredible devoted members of our community like Mr. Van Nortbrook and Mr. Calavoda and Ms. Frank and Judge Walton, and they want to help. And so here's a mechanism to do that. The immediate thought is not how do we make this square with standard business practices and city procedures. The immediate need is how do we serve these kids and how do we serve them right now. So there's no ill intent with that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's wanting to do good and understanding that when you're dealing with a large organization like the city, you can't always be as nimble as the needs are for the young men you're trying to serve. So we need to come up with a mechanism that formalizes that relationship so there's still that nimbleness and ability to react quickly when needs arise, but still the transparency and the openness so our taxpayers and advocates know exactly where the money's coming from and how it's being spent. And I don't think there's any disagreement about that. But I'm just saying I know how we got there because you've worked in nonprofit. If you need resources and money, you're going to find a way to do it. And you do it legitimately, but it doesn't fit into an ideal framework for oversight and accountability. So that's what we're moving towards. I again think that largely these recommendations will help to make an even stronger organization with even greater leverage on financial resources and other resources. It's going to add even a greater degree of credibility through transparency for the organization, and I look forward to what the Reichert House looks like in 3 months, in 6 months, and in a year. It's in a very strong situation right now, and it's only going to get stronger and better as we make these improvements. And I know that we have the people in charge right now that are committed to that care about it. They're mission driven, and they'll get it done. So we're in a good place. So with that, we'll turn. There's 2 other commissioners that would like to make comments, and then we will open it up for public comment on this issue. Commissioner Ward.
Mr. Mayor, the motion is to accept the audit, is that correct?
As well as the city manager's response
Right,
and recommendations.
Right. To accept what we have.
And if we actually could
And to
add
put in a third party report.
I was going to mention to ask you to come back to us.
July 18th. Okay, motion or a second agree to that.
Okay, for reasons that I already discussed, I'm not going to be able to support that motion. I think that there are problems with this, and I'm not going to put a good face on that. The problems that we've addressed can be worked on without this audit being accepted. We already know what needs to be done. There are things in here that are pointed out that must be worked on. We all agree on that. You're going to do that, the manager and the leadership at Reichert House are going to get those things done. I would rather we started over. But this is going to pass, and that's okay. But I just wanted to restate that. Then after this motion, I'm going to have another motion that leads more to the future and how we might bring in some other folks who can help us think about things in a different way. So I don't want this whole thing to go away after this motion is considered. I have another one to bring forward. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be able to support the motion either. I think there's issues with it, but there definitely is one line in here that's not a true statement. So I don't want to approve an audit that I know at least one line is not true. I think we should start over on the audit as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, members of the public, again, 3 minutes. 1 minute yellow light will come on and let you know that you should begin thinking about wrapping up. And when you start, just please state your name for the record so our clerk can get you down. Welcome back.
Okay, as you know, I'm Mrs. Craig again. I left and I read in the newspapers some disturbing news. First of all, you all as an elected officials should be ashamed of yourselves to allow Mr. Holt to submit anything for y'all to have a meeting on. You all forced the resignation of Russ Blackbird. Y'all forced the resignation of Anthony Lyons, men of integrity. This man has no integrity. If it had been a black employee that had 2 encounters with GPD, he would have been terminated. But this is why I'm here again. It's very disturbing to the boys in the hood that support the Riker House and Mr. Jones. I'm coming before this commission. I need a special event permit to bring 15 neighborhoods together so we can show our support for Chief Jones and the Riker House. If I'm denied that permit, then the Gators can't have a parade, the Pride can't have a parade, the Art Fest, and I want to block off the street. We don't need no intervention from GPD. When you all going to be upset, and Chief Jones is here, you know this. I told him this in 2011. The pit bulls for the feds is going to come into this town. Then you all need to be investigated. If y'all have a meeting on anything, all of you all need to be investigated by the feds. And I sincerely hope my son is on that team that was a former city employee.
Thank you. And the GPD will love to help you with your permit for your event. They'll get with you. Welcome.
Can we restart my time, please? Thank you. Nathan Scott. Just want to state for the record that I support the REICHERT House, Chief Tony Jones, and the city auditor. What is the root cause of the problem here? The ongoing lack of management oversight by the Gainesville City Commission and city manager. The same problems, fraud, theft, lack of internal project controls, lack of oversight, lack of internal financial controls, are systemic across several city departments. I'd like to start my comments by referring to the Gainesville Sun articles and the press release issued by the interim city manager related to the latest adverse audit report issued by the city auditor. What is completely inappropriate, commissioners, are the comments made by the interim city manager. There is no conflict of interest. Under Florida rules of professional responsibility and regulation, a CPA cannot conduct an audit if a material conflict exists. Mr. Holt is a licensed CPA in the state of Florida. The only conflict is the one that has been apparently created by the interim city manager, who unilaterally recommended wasting more taxpayer money to hire an independent auditor. The city auditor has found demonstrated lack of internal financial controls in several recent audits that reflect poorly upon the city manager and the Gainesville City Commission. Fraud, theft, lack of internal financial controls, Brazilian butt lifts. These are the norm under the failed leadership and dysfunctional governance at City Hall. You guys are not doing your job. If the Gainesville City Commission spent more time fixing the mismanagement and waste at City Hall rather than having your nose in everything other than what the city government, what city government should be doing, then maybe the Gainesville City Commission would not keep getting embarrassed with adverse audit findings. Someone seemingly has an axe to grind because the city audit reports have repeatedly exposed demonstrated lack of internal financial controls within several city departments. In response, the interim city manager has alleged that the city auditor has a conflict of interest where none exists and seemingly retaliated by airing the laundry about his family. This definitely seems to be a setup of the city auditor. Why? Because the same information reported by the Gainesville Sun was anonymously mailed to me months ago just after former city manager Anthony Lyons resigned. In the absence of the demurrer, the citizens of Gainesville can only rightfully assume that the Gainesville City Commission is complicit in these attacks on the city auditor and condones the inappropriate statements made by the interim city manager. Bottom line, if the interim city manager is politicizing this issue and inappropriately targeting the city auditor for an audit report that reflects negatively upon the city manager and the Gainesville City Commission, stop attacking the city auditor for doing his job as a licensed CPA. Again, I support the REICHERT House. There are no organizations perfect, commissioners. I think we have the right idea, fix the problem. I support the REICHERT House. I was with Chief Jones eating collard greens at the Spring Arts Festival a couple weeks ago. Okay? So the problem isn't the REICHERT House. The problem is the REICHERT House is just another adverse audit report. You guys aren't doing your job. Look at the parks and theft and the waste, Brazilian butt lifts. Come on. It's you and the city manager that should be fixing the problem. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Before you start my time, I just want to make sure that I make you aware that Ms. Rosa Williams, the chair of Black on Black Crime Task Force, has abdicated her time to me, as well as the vice chair.
Right.
And the
So
chair.
we don't do that here, Ms. Frank. We don't cede time. Everybody's treated equally as a citizen, so everybody gets equal time.
Even when you're personally named in a report that's been
That's
made
correct. The standards
public.
and rules of the commission are that everybody gets exactly the same amount of time.
I'm certain that I read on the City of Gainesville's website that you abdicate time. Have you changed that policy?
We do not do that.
Okay.
They're welcome to speak if they would like.
well, they've asked me to speak as an attorney
Well,
and as
you'll
the
have to do it in-
individual
you'll have to do it
that's
in three-
been
you'll have to do it in 3
personally
minutes.
involved in this, Mayor.
You get the same rights as every other person.
And clearly I don't. Clearly I don't. I've had the pleasure of interacting with some of you, but not all of you. My name is Bobby J. Frank. I'm a local attorney and also had the pleasure of serving on the board of Palm Breeze Youth Services. I, along with attorney Tim McClendon, were requested by PBYS board to assist the city in obtaining relevant documents pertaining to the goals of the audit. My colleague, Mr. McClendon, just handed you a very thick packet with everything that I'm going to assert here today. There's documents and a response to back up everything that I assert. Specifically, there is highlights in there of not 1, not 2, not 3, but very similar to Commissioner Hayes Santos's response and inquiry of Carlos Holt. There are untruthful assertions contained in that final audit report, and there are documents proving such in your hands now. Throughout the process, Mr. Holt was made aware from day one that Palm Breeze Youth Services was eager to assist the city in every way possible. That's what those children deserve, the best of the best at all times. We wanted to make sure that it was ran as efficiently as possible for the benefit of our most vulnerable citizens, our underprivileged youth. At no time ever did PBYS refuse to produce documents relevant to Reichert House Youth Program. What Mr. McClendon and I did firmly state at the direction of the board was that PBYS's mission statement does not merely cover Reichert House Youth Program and that there were other separate non-city affiliated goals that PBYS served, and due to our fiduciary duty to keep donors' information anonymous, we would not produce any non-relevant documents, nor would we give him unfettered access to accounts that had 0 grant or city funds earmarked for Reichert House Youth Program. Mr. Holt refused to accept the clear boundaries of his inquiry. He continued to demand unfettered access to bank accounts, as demonstrated in the correspondence that I provided in the packet for you all there. And he had no authority to demand such. I've had personal conversations one-on-one with several of you, and I've identified specific areas and produced these documents. He continued to refuse to be specific in his request for further documents, though I do note that he did give that courtesy to another nonprofit entity. He actually put the documents up on the screen and said, well, we identified this, and said, go ahead and follow up on this. We asked for the same courtesy, but we were denied that. You can imagine our surprise when we read the completely false assertions contained within Carlos Holt's draft report, and then, of course, those that were carried over to his final report. When even one claim of fact is proven to be false, it taints the credibility of the author and the reliability of the document that he produced, and that can't be denied. Unfortunately, there isn't one claim of fact proven to be false in these reports. There's a plethora of them. In the interest of time, I'm certain that the remainder of the items that I've written for your ears would be beneficial, but since I get 3 minutes, though I've devoted over 100 hours of pro bono time for this effort, I will tell you, the children of the program deserve better, the taxpayers deserve better, which is why I request that you reject the report in its entirety, authorize a thorough, unbiased audit be conducted by an unbiased unbiased party, and sanction Mr. Holt for his unprofessional and grossly negligent actions up to and including termination.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
My name's Tim McClendon, and I also work with Palm Breeze Youth Services. I'm the other attorney that the board had asked to work and to help identify relevant records. I just wanted to follow up on what Ms. Frank said, to just reiterate what you have in your letter from me, and the reason that I think this report needs to be rejected and you move ahead with an entirely new audit. It is, to my mind, unheard of that he single out this volunteer who was working to identify these records, and she is singled out in this report that goes forward as a public document. This is an abominable treatment of volunteers, people working pro bono with community organizations that are being targeted by the city. And I strongly urge you to repudiate this sort of practice. It can't become common practice going forward. As she said, our intention from the beginning of the board's resolution, whatever city programs there are, we must account for those. Anything that pass through, and yes, many of the principled positions, both contained in the auditor's discussion and your discussions, we are fine with. Regular rules of order, they need to be adopted. Ad hoc methods, which is, I the way we were brought in many times, not the best way to go. We're fine with any of that, any audit moving forward. But this audit, with the allegations that are misstatements, and especially with the seizing and the identifying and the focusing on one of the participants, one of the volunteers, for reasons that are unaccountable and inexplicable to me, I strongly urge you to reject this proposal and to move forward with a new audit. And I do thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Ken Van Noordwijk. I've been with a volunteer for Chief Jones since 2003. When I first met him, I got a big set of plans, which ended up being the headquarters of REICHERT House as it is today. I raised almost $1 million with a friend, Dave Coffrin, Dr. Dave Coffrin, and we built the 4 buildings and purchased the land and quit claimed them to the city with the understanding that you would mentor our program for us. I feel that in the last few years, and I've watched this very closely, and I've studied it quite a bit. I have a degree in physics education, math education. I taught 2 years. I have a little taste of what's going on. I can tell you that you'll never find a group of people like this again, assembled in one place, doing what they're doing. Nobody in the United States is doing what we're doing at our population size. And here's a quick metric. This whole mess is about 40-something thousand bucks. DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice's position is that if once a youth is discharged, if they stay out 6 months without recidivism, it's a success for DJJ. John, what's our recidivism rate? About how much? 80%? We have about 8 with REICHERT House? We have about 80%. This is a tough business. These are human lives, the most complex and difficult of human problems. Our clients aren't normal people. They're people who none of you have ever had to live in their shoes. And I think the city needs to reevaluate its mission in this program and give them the funds and personnel they need. Their administration is granted weak. Why? Because everybody's focused in the program, working on the program, helping the boys. They do their evenings. They give them their food. They sacrifice eternally. They do disrespectful jobs because of the lack of staff at the program and the demand that the youth put on them and the quantity of problems we have in our community. We're very lucky to have this. We are truly blessed. You all have done a great job and have tried as hard as you can, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And my personal opinion is the money spent on this audit would have done a whole lot better if you'd have stuck it into our administration and given us some book people to help us on our administrative side. The program side, every one of the people involved in this, I've watched this very closely for 10 years ongoing.
Thank you, Mr. Van Noordwijk. If you could please conclude.
Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Teresa Evans. I'm a witness with the Rocky House because they changed my son. My son he used to go to school and do a lot of bad stuff. Rocky House changed my son. Rocky House is a good program for these boys, and they need this program. My son is finna be 11 years old, and he is almost finna go to the 6th grade. I thank Mr. DJ for working with my son, because my son was finna go on the wrong road. My son disrespect me. He throw chairs at me and everything. I'm glad for the Rocket House for helping me with my son.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, I'm speaking to you now from a professional standpoint with this. I'm retired now, but I'm a 32-year retired CPA. I worked with Deloitte Haskins & Sells, Big 8 accounting firm, Coca-Cola. I was their internal auditor, headquarters, Coca-Cola. But I stood here in 1985 with the same situation going on. I was the executive director of United Gainesville Community Development Corporation. I stood here, there were two people that are presently here in the audience, Chief Tony Jones and Rosa B. Williams. She was our chairman of the board. When I started, we were number 18. We weren't even, there were 16 that were going to be funded and supported by the state of Florida. We were number 18. We ended up being number 1 in the state of Florida. We had the exact same issues that you all are talking about now. And I say to you, there were two people who are still employed and connected with the city of Gainesville who can certainly help you in addition to the external CPA. Mark Benton, I think you all have to decide whether you want the Reichert House to continue to be an independent organization or a department of the city. Once you make that determination, in 1992, the city of Gainesville decided to have its own CDC in-house. Mark Benton can give you all the information in terms of what made that successful. So if you decide to have the Reichert House as a part of the city, you certainly can go by that. If you want to have the Reichert House as an independent organization, we worked with James Moore and Company, CPA firm still existing here in town, absolutely was instrumental in taking us to number 1. You got to hire the administrative staff, as the gentleman said here. You have to have that administrative staff. You have to have the financial person. Our financial administrator right now runs your CDBG program, Ms. Vianne Ginyard. You all have the information, you have the people here who can help you get to the next level. Even though there's some issues that I heard through the report, I agree with Madam City Manager. This is fixable. This is really fixable. And it's fixable, I mean, when we hear about the outstanding support of the Reichert House in the community, statewide and national acclaim, then what we're talking about is not that difficult. But yes, you do need the external auditor to come in who will be independent, regardless of whether I was a CPA when I became the executive director of United Gainesville, so I couldn't come in and do my own audit. But having that external auditor come in, and then it wouldn't be the issues. I agree with everything I heard from the commissioners here in terms of what's needed. All right.
Appreciate that. Come on up. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Eric Oliver. I'm a product of the Reichert House. I have a master's in public administration, a master's in social work, currently in process of getting my clinical license. I'm also a disabled war veteran. I hold a license. I'm former correction officer, former law enforcement officer, former Florida Department of Law Enforcement instructor. My problem here is this, that you guys don't understand how the Reichert House started out and what we do. I listen to you guys. Thank you for your support, all commissioners, city manager, lawyer. The Reichert House is like a bowl of soup. And being a bowl of soup, we have many different parts of that soup. See, there was once upon a time where the city of Gainesville did not contribute anything to the Reichert House other than then Corporal Tony Jones to come there. You didn't give any money. You didn't give any time. Because the house that now has his name on it, the lights wasn't always on. The water wasn't always on. And he always hated for me to say this, but it was rats on the floor. But we came anyway, because then Chief Clifton allowed him to mentor boys, because see, back in 84 and 85, the height of the crack era, Ms. Rosa and May, God bless her soul, Mr. Baxter, that's how the Reichert House started. We're a bowl of soup. Did y'all give any money? No. All you did was allow the chief of police to send one officer. And I come back now and I look, these guys are awesome. It's 120 kids a day. Back then it was just only 5 or 7 of us. So when I come back, them kids don't know who I am. They have no idea. They tell them, they say, hey, he started Reichert House. Man, it's so prideful. I see y'all take so much pride. And what we was telling Chief Jones, we don't want to be police explorers. They already know we were Civil Air Patrol, we were Boy Scouts. United States Army came in, DJJ. It was a lot of things that y'all have no idea who we are. But see, also doing the audit, he never took time to go to the founders. I never see he took time to sit down with Chief Jones. You got to sit down and talk to him. You got to sit down and talk to Ms. Rosa. How did you do this? How did you keep it going? I'm 47, and it was in 84. So it's a lot of success stories, but you guys you don't know the story. One other thing, you want to do all these changes. These guys doing 120 kids a day. How they gonna do this? How they gonna have time to come up with these new policies? So you guys are gonna you can't be bullies either. Or put all your money into the city account. But why? It's a bowl of soup. Black on Black and all these other organizations, it's a bowl of soup. Give them another position, then we can come up with how to organize it. That's how we can fix it. It costs money to do this, and y'all know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Louis Calavoda, and I'm the chair of the board of directors of Palm Breeze. And we simply want to say unanimously we support Commissioner Ward's motion without equivocation. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, Commissioner Ward doesn't have a motion on the floor. I think you're speaking his opposition to the motion.
I think I heard enough that we're going to very much support what he has in mind.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
E.J. Brown again. Okay, so I'm here as a grandmother who my grandson has benefited from the program. I'm also here as a college professor. And so I have an I'm retired. 65 retired.
Congratulations.
So I have two questions. First, in my ex-college professor role, we had 3 roles in that role. We had service, well, let me go back. Education, research, and service. A part of that service was service at the local level, service at the state level, service at the national level. So while I was at the University of Central Florida, I founded a nonprofit organization focused on prevention, education, outreach for rural minorities in these rural counties surrounding Alachua County. In that role, I served as the founder and the president. In that role, my service capacity, I wrote program grants. Now, there were other faculty members, and I'm also a researcher, so I wrote research grants for the University of Central Florida. And I wrote program grants for the nonprofit. There were faculty members who did not understand the difference between my research grants and my program grants. They did not understand why I was not writing those program grants under UCF. The issue was some of those program grants that I procured for UCF, for CHARM, UCF would not qualify for those program grants. So that was a problem that I had to educate educators about the difference. There were also some issues when I went up for tenure, even though I had a service component in my role. National service was okay. Service to the university was okay. But my community service to my community, because I am a native, I don't even know what you call it. I'm from Union County. I am from rural Union County, a family of 10. And I am the oldest daughter. So I'm number 3 out of 10, the only one who went to college and has a PhD. So I needed to give back to my community. So when I go up for tenure, my service to my community was not recognized and was actually questioned as to why I was doing so much service to my community. So to these young men, and they are young men, because I'm 65, when you're talking about that conflict of interest, if it's going to be a conflict of interest, I think the city needs to clearly delineate, explicitly state what roles they should have outside of their
Thank you, Ms. Conley.
role with the, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. As a college professor myself, I know how hard it is. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Dewberry. I'm from Miami, Florida. I'm here speaking because I found out about the REICHERT House once I came here to Gainesville to school. Just want to give you a little backstory. So I didn't grow up in the best of neighborhoods. I didn't go to a great high school. Statistics weren't great. I have many of the friends who I grew up with, they're no longer with us or in jail because they didn't have a program or something after school that they could partake in that would help keep them out of trouble. Due to programs such as GREAT, DARE, drug and resistance education, I won my first computer in an essay contest, which is how I spent a lot of my time doing homework. I had 2 older brothers. I had to compete for time to get my homework done, sometimes 2 a.m. just to get through school. And, putting in applications late at night to go to college. I didn't know that there was a possibility for college because that's not what my environment was around me. There were mentors and people who spoke in my lives that there's more for you. You can do more. And I came to Gainesville for college, thankful for those mentors that, helped pave the way for me to see that there was more and I didn't have to be a product of my environment. So I've always thought about, man, it'd be great to start a program like this to where, people have a place to go after school. There's good mentorship, there's a nurturing environment to help foster, business ideas, just something else that you're not used to, in our communities. And then I heard about REICHERT House and I was like, man, that sounds really awesome. This can't possibly exist. So I go by one day and it exists. So I stopped by to volunteer, and I have to tell you, a lot of what I'm hearing about need for additional staff and resources, I've seen it. I thank you all for everything that you've done. You've recognized the program, that it's causing good impact in the community, and I have to tell you that it is, and I can't help but think how many other of my peers that aren't here would be here if there was a program like REICHERT House around. So, thank you for your support. You gentlemen are awesome. It's great meeting you guys. Unfortunately, I read the news article. A friend read the news article to me on the way from fishing. I'm on the way from a fishing trip, and I heard the news, and thankfully, none of the reports are conclusive, and it was information that may have been spread a bit prematurely. So I'm glad to hear that was the case. And I was supposed to be in Orlando 3 hours ago on a business trip, and I've had lots of opportunities because of great mentorship. So thank you all. And
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, first off, Commissioner Harvey, good words earlier when you started out. I've been involved with, excuse me, I've been involved with REICHERT House for over 20 years. And I've been an master trainer for their instructors. I've been a volunteer. I've raised tens of thousands of dollars for REICHERT House. I was on the board for REICHERT House, Inc. For a long time, past president of that board. I've been intimately involved in just about every phase of the program, going back working with the chief a long time ago. I came tonight for many reasons, but one of which I heard that there was some bad words going on around about the operation of REICHERT House. I am very encouraged in hearing that that's not true. These guys do an incredible job. Currently, I teach, I've got a training program over in Forest Pines, teaching extremely at-risk, unemployed black adults technical skills to help them get jobs. I wish that all of my students had the opportunity to go through what these kids have a chance to go through. The problem with REICHERT House, since I've been involved with it, has always been money. The incorrectness that you may see has really been more a matter of robbing Peter to pay Paul. I've never experienced any sense of anyone doing anything for their own profit, to put in their own pocket, illegal. Now, some things were set up sort of shady, okay, but it was all with the intent to have the money be in the proper place. I would encourage you not to accept this financial report, to start from scratch. There's a lot of information that you all have not had the availability to access that is out there that you should be able to access. I also would highly recommend, because of the cash situation, that if you're taking anything away from the cash operation of the program, that you consider that. And I would also recommend that the program be pulled out of GPD, become a separate organization, but the funding has to be there to do that, so that they're not robbing Peter to pay Paul in the future, because the program will always suffer from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Rosen.
Okay, I am Rosalie William, and I'm not supposed to come up today, but I could not help myself. I want to thank the city for everything what they have did for the Black on Black Crime Task Force and the REICHERT House, because you have been really good. Even the auditors and I myself is friends. But what I wanted to say was, part of over half of the money what we get come through the state attorney's office. And for anyone to look at our books, that's not possible. They will have to go to the state attorney's office. That's what Mr. Savone told me to tell people. If they want to see anything, they have to come to his office. The other important thing I wanted to say, if the commission vote for all of the outside agency money to go through this up to the city, that will not help us in at all, because a bunch of us take money from our pocket in order to support the REICHERT House. We don't get the funds from the city or nobody else, and we do not get grants. So we take money from our own pocket to help these young men. So if that happens, we have to come to the city to give them money. Before we could take money from our pocket to support the REICHERT House, we would have to kiss and say goodbye.
Thank you, Ms. Rosa. And that is not the recommendation or a suggestion. That's not being considered, so.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so when I think about it, I want to thank you. My name is Mary McKinney. I'm 12 years old, and I want to thank you for supporting the REICHERT House, because the REICHERT House supported me in many ways. They helped me do my homework, and they're kind of like a father figure too, and they helped me with plenty of things. That's about it.
Thank you, thank you. You're welcome back anytime. I'll take that smile any day. Welcome.
Jim McFarland, scared to say anything because you usually go the opposite way of what I suggest. But how can you be anything but proud of having a program? And I'm sure, and that's why I'm hearing from each one of our commissioners, everything. The REICHERT House and the program and the police involvement is awesome. We look at it, though, as a business person. You say you made some of those mistakes, you could be in big trouble if you were audited. Everybody gets scared when they hear the word auditors coming to look at it. And I'm very concerned about where we're sitting with this. I feel uneasiness with the audit situation, and I feel strongly right now that as a commission, you need to set this audit aside. I don't think you need to put money in at this point to an independent audit. I think that's wasted money that should be in the program that's reaching our at-risk kids. I think we need to turn to a city manager and say, work on this, solve this problem. Accounting and justifying it is important. I don't think we need a big audit at this point. I think you may need to target a year from now. Let's see where things are at and how it adds up. let's not waste money that you should be putting into the funds that are helping these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on this item? Welcome.
Yes, Delton Johnson, Program Manager over elementary at the Reichert House. Thank you all for everything that you do. And Mayor Poe, you mentioned a lot of great things. And one thing that I definitely want to recommend is that the articles that were put out, if you guys can come together and replenish the reputation that we have as staff at Reichert House Youth Academy as role models and heroes to some young men that are out there. Because some students of ours, you know, they didn't want to go to school the next day off of the article and then the interview that was published. So, you know, I know that Mr. Alexander can speak for himself, but as our leader, I definitely want his reputation cleared and cleaned up because that article definitely did us a huge disservice. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
How you doing? My name is Kelvin Mattier, and I am the cousin of John Alexander. A little bit about myself. I have over 13 years working with at-risk youth. 2015, I moved to Alice Springs, Australia, where I work with indigenous youth in the Amungana community. Upon my arrival back to America, 2016, I worked with Union Family Community Center in Levy County, Florida, where I created JBU Mentor Program, and we got a contract to work through the Department of Juvenile Justice. Also during 2016, out of 100 applicants, 9 were chosen at the National Mentor Summit in Washington, D.C., and I, Kelvin Mattill, was one of those 9, and I represented Union Family Community Center, as well as the Department of Juvenile Justice and the JBU Mentoring Program in Washington, D.C. This news article kind of caught me by surprise. Like, surprise. Nepotism policy. Man, how can I say this? I'm gonna just give y'all the procedure to where I became an employee with the city of Gainesville. When I decided to leave Union Family Community Center, I applied with the city of Gainesville Police Department. I was interviewed by 3 individuals within the department, and at the Reichert House Youth Academy, Mr. Alexander was not one. I received a phone call and an email stating that they wanted to offer me a conditional job offer. Mr. Alexander was not that individual. That was through the Human Resources Department. They offered me a set salary. My response is the salary negotiable? They said yes. Looking at my 13 plus years of experience and my international experience, I counter offered. They contacted me back, Human Resources, with a different offer. I accept that offer. On November the 5th, I was hired with the Gainesville Police Department. And my immediate supervisors is Mr. Young, Mr. Belk. Nowhere is John Alexander supervising me in any area. So with these last 9 seconds, that article put him in a bad light. And I really wish we cleaned that up.
Thank you. And the reporter who wrote that is listening and reporting right now, so he heard every word that you said.
Cool. Appreciate you.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
They weren't just going to come on their own.
Can my 3 minutes start over?
No.
I appreciate that. As a father, my name is Antoine Bryant. These are my 2 boys, Asaph and Jadathan, and come here as a citizen in support of Reichert House. Many of the men there are my dear brothers and friends, and I saw the report, and what I saw was I believe that what was meant for evil, the Most High is going to turn it around for the good of the Riker House. And it's great because it highlighted the lack of funding that this program actually needs. It should have been a shocking, only $40,000. Why is there not more being poured in? And as a father, I can say that, I tell my boys this all the time, that when you have father figures in your life, their mission is to support you, is to affirm you, and to give you everything that you need. The Riker House stands as a father figure in the community to boys who have been adversely impacted by lack of economics, lack of money, and lack of having fathers in the home. My young son is an aspiring entrepreneur, has his own business. This is an aspiring athlete who also has a great mind for things. And I know that's attributed to fathers being in the community, being inside of their sons' lives. And the Riker House is a father figure in the community. And we need more funding, more should be giving. And as you guys give and decide to take measures to give, I believe more will come back out of the community, more good, more righteousness, more boys having the testimony of, man, this program has impacted my life, and I thank the people who have allowed the Riker House to keep going. And so I believe that this is a great thing that has happened, although there were some negative things that came to light. But this is an awesome thing, and I'm proud to be a part of this city. I'm a transplant from Philadelphia, but I'm proud to be a part of a city that has this type of thing going on because we need it. I needed it as a youth because I was fatherless, but I'm glad, I tell my boys all the time, that having a father in their lives is like having Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Garnett, all of the great NBA superstars versus their friends. There's no competition at all. And the Riker House stands as that giant in this community. And it's a shame that the article did cast it in a negative light, but I'm glad because we're all here to say, yes, we should fund it even more. 40,000, what? There's only 40, we should give them $400 million to move forward. And at the disadvantage of what has been in this country. I'm not going to go into depth in that because I will, but thank you guys for your support. Thank you, Riker House, for all you do in our community for our Black African-American boys, because we're coming and we're going to crush every competition that's there.
Thank you. And there is a sort of middle ground there. The entire city budget is about $400 million. But the city does give just shy of $1 million, or did last year. So we're about a little over $900,000. Not saying that's enough. I'm just saying it's more than 40,000. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we will thank you all for please.
Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening.
And the mayor. Listen, initially when I came in, I was full of just indignation. But as I listened to you all speak and share your heart, it really calmed me. And I just want to say thank you. I had to step away to pick up some kids, and I was watching. When I heard the words, it comforted me to know that you all are supporting us. And so I want to say thank you for that. On the story that was put out, I want to kind of say something about Mr. Alexander and what he's had to endure. I don't think people realize the sacrifice this man has made. He's the only one, most of the time, I feel, that stands up for the inefficiencies that we have within our organization as young men looking for guidance, looking for professional development, because it's not. It doesn't seem like it's been a priority in my 16 years at Riker House, where you've invested the time to professionally develop the staff that's there. The innovation that we have, we thank God for the creativity in the gene that He put in us. But the city has a responsibility to, equip the staff so that they can go on. John has been championing those efforts. However, it has not happened. And so we've had to come up with ways to do the extraordinary things that you talk about. You're talking about having to explain to my wife why the funds are low, because I've had to kick out funds to do unique things with the kids, whether it's paying for food, not having the P card, or John finally getting the P card, and all the scrutiny that comes with the things that he had to jump through that most people who have P cards do not jump through. And it just seemed like we were being targeted. And it seemed like the stories, the sequence of stories that begin to come out begin to just rip the hearts of our young men, and having to go to the school and deal with, kids saying, well, Mr. Lewis, two of the kids that were indirectly mentioned, you had to go do home visits to just make sure that they were going to be all right. Because we talk about bullying in our schools, but then you have a media coverage that's just this bullying. And these kids are getting the counseling, they're getting the things that they need, all the problems that they do have. We need to make sure that we're protecting not just our financial responsibilities, but we're protecting the lives of our young people. And I'm hoping that you all will begin to just be a little bit, and I'm saying this as a community, that we be a little bit more mindful that we're not just trying to get the hype, we're not trying to get the story, we're not trying to get the credibility, but we have to do things responsibly. You understand what I'm saying? You got to do things responsible. And so I just want to say that as a community, there's nothing that we can't do, but we got to stick together. We got to be transparent. We do have to be transparent, but there's a way about going about transparency. We can't just think that things are going on and we know that they're not. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yeah, appreciate it. Anybody else? Welcome.
Hey, y'all doing all right?
Doing all right.
Awesome. I'm Caleb Young. Just like Mr. Lewis. By the way, I'm one of the managers at Reichert House. I came to this program, I was 20 years old. I wasn't a product of Reichert House. And I'm going to forget these notes because I've been taking them since I've been in here. But I was always around positive individuals. I can remember a group of officers coming to my church, Bishop Camps. And the first thing they did was say, shake my hand, son. Look in my eye. And I can remember Miss Rosa coming around the corner with those sandwiches. Or Miss Early Thompson putting the black on black crime task community choir together. I can remember those things. And it impacted me, right? So sitting here, I began to be upset. I'm upset at, the news media, the coverage, because I know the work that, number one, I sacrifice. These guys sacrifice, and I'm just getting over a cold, so y'all excuse my tone, but it takes a level of sacrifice to work outside of 5 o'clock. I see that every day. To work outside of 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 1, 2, 3. I see that every day. And so I was infuriated when I first walked in here, but to hear the support, and I know some of the commissioners and some of you all, and work with some of you all with some of the youth in football, and but the work has to continue. I think it's robbery if we don't talk about the elephant in the room. All right, we have some internal issues not only at Reichert House, but mostly in the Gainesville Police Department. All right, whoever and wherever this story comes from, the angle that it took came from within. And I'm going to say a word that I promised I would say, because that's just who I am. All right, we are dealing with a certain amount of racism within our departments. Now, we can slice it how we want to slice it. You can say it systemically. You can say it's backwards or reverse. But we're dealing with that stuff. We have to focus on this issue. And again, I came here when I was 20 years old. I'm 35. I've been here almost 16 years within this organization. And I don't outright think nobody in this room or up here know who I am. But I'm one of those guys that's laboring. I'm behind the scenes. I've been here for a long time. All right. But today I wanted you all to see who I was and who these guys were. Because we are laboring every day, every weekend with the families and the children. And again, thank you. If you want to look into something, and I know I got about 3 seconds, please look into.
You're actually past.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I can talk. That's probably why I went last. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Give you the last word, Mr. Alexander.
The commissioners, the mayor, assistant city manager, Attorney Shelley, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to be here. Thanks for all the support. I'm in the audience, and even thank you to Mr. Hope and his team for doing the audit. But this has been a tough week for me. We talk about leadership. We talk about our boys standing up in the face of adversity. But we teach them to stand on integrity and in truth. And we always tell them to look at themselves in the mirror. And if they can see anything that they got to fix, first be a man and do that, but still stand. And today, this week, I had to eat those words. When you turn on the news media and you see your name and you go to your job and the media is there, and you go home and your wife, my wife is sitting in this audience right now, and she's an employee of the city of Gainesville. And I just imagine my son today writing his name, my namesake, and having to see his dad's name smeared in the community. But listen, I want to let you know something. Hey, I stand strong, and that's what leadership is about. REICHERT House is a leading program, not only in this community, in this state, and in this country. And I thank you, commissioners, for the support. And I heard what you said. We got some things we got to work on. We got some things we got to fix. But with your help, I think we can do that. But, you know, we didn't get here by ourselves. I can think of previous administrations that directed city staff to create this REICHERT House Inc. board. And that very same city employee that Russ Blackburn told to create or resurrect the REICHERT House Inc. board was a city of Gainesville employee. We followed suit. There's many protocols that I can see where we didn't just create on our own, and I don't cast blame, but we didn't get here by ourselves. But when I look at my young men and he's hungry, when I get a message from Michael Lewis and FAMU, who was a McKinney-Vento student who was homeless, no mother, no father, but somehow made it out. And he's now the McKinney-Vento ambassador's representative for the entire FAMU University. When he texts me and says, hey, Pops, I need $40 for some books. Well, I don't have a city budget to fund that. That comes out of me and Miss Alexander's pocket, Chief Jones's pocket, the staff pocket, Robert Woody, Miss Rosa, and everyone that you see here. But we're going to get it right. And we promise you, our goal is to make Gainesville proud and that REICHERT House continue to shine as a jewel. And I am so pumped about the future of a REICHERT House Youth Academy. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. And you've already made us proud, Mr. Alexander. There's no need to achieve that, but thank you for your leadership. Anybody else? Okay, let's move back. We've got a motion on the floor, which just to remind everybody, it is to accept the auditor's report along with the management responses to that report, to bring back an update on the progress to those issues at the July 18th meeting. And there was one other, that was it? Okay. Okay, so all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. That motion passes, will you know? Okay, that motion passes 4-2 with A. Santos and Ward in dissent and Johnson absent. Can it wait till this evening? We've got like 9 resolutions. Okay, very good. So we're going to stand in recess until 5:45.